Okay. Hello. Hi. We're just, thanks for joining us. We're just waiting for our guest of honor to clock in, and we're going to continue our conversation today on the revolving door and coming out of the closet. So it's great to see people. If you're joining for the first time, welcome. If you're back, it's good to see you all again.
Hi, honey.
Yes. Oh, I always feel so relieved when the guest comes on. I feel, oh, there's two people to have a conversation.
Hi,
Welcome.
sweetie.
Hi, Howie. So good to see you here.
I just saw you.
I know. Full disclosure, folks who are tuning in, Howie and I are husband and husband. And I thought it was kind of fitting, given that it's Pride, that in addition to having conversations about art making, uh, who else do I parse this out with every day but my husband? And so I really wanted to celebrate that too and celebrate my love for this beautiful man here and talk about the revolving door. So the conversation is about coming out and what that means and was inspired by this quote of Mae West, who talked about the closet having a revolving door, meaning we're going in and out of it and it not being sort of one reality that you're in something and then instantly you come out and things are never the same again. Like that there's this kind of spiral or fluidity to going in and out. And closets happen in different ways and coming out happens in different ways. I felt all day like I'm coming out again by
Um,
these conversations with different people and on Instagram. And so I'm curious to unpack that a little bit. And this conversation is called Remixed 2. And that'll become evident, I think, as we sort of talk about your work, Howie. And I want to introduce you to everybody. So I'll let everybody know who's listening a bit about Howie and what he does. And Howie is a mixed, multidisciplinary artist, and he's worn many hats in his time, from directing, designing, visual arts, and performance in theater and film. And he's worked with companies from like the Luminato Festival, the Stratford Festival, the Canadian Opera Company, the National Arts Centre, the Shaw Festival, and Black Theatre Workshop. He's recently released, plug away, his feature film debut called Mixed Up, that he made with trans filmmaker Jack Fox in association with Out TV. And I really do urge any of you listening, if you haven't seen it, to watch it. It's an incredible piece. He was also an assistant producer to Dene Métis filmmaker Marie Clements on her film Red Snow, available on CBC Gem. And he's currently an artist in residence with Wild Seed Black Arts Fellowship with Black Lives Matters Toronto, and creating his first operatic work about famed Canadian contralto Portia White. And he's making that in collaboration with Nima Bickersteth and Sean Mays, supported by the Ontario Arts Council and the Canadian Opera Company. And he's also developing a new television series with Sherida Eswar and Alison Wong. Welcome, Howie. You're busy.
I know. I
Sending
thought
that
that
out.
would be.
Oh, that's what he does all the time in his studio. Busy.
I thought that would be so weird hearing you say that out loud, and that's made me feel very nice hearing my hubby say that.
It's interesting. A lot of collaboration. Yeah, I'm aware of like collaboration is a really important part of your own process. And I wonder if you could speak to that a bit. What you enjoy about collaboration, why that's there. Um,
Mm.
is there something queer about that? Is collaboration part of this, maybe a queer way of making work?
Oh, that's a good question. I think the biggest part about collaboration for me is something, we've talked about quite extensively. This idea of succession, that
Hmm.
you can obtain knowledge from what, one of the youngest people in the room, one of the oldest people in the room. Like that exchange is generational and interracial and the intersections of all those people that you can work with, I think they're limitless. And I really love the people um, that have come into my artistic process through, you know, film and theater, and like that's truly um, the gift of being multidisciplinary, is sort of leaning into forms
Yeah.
that work for me, but then also rejecting those forms when I want to try something new. And I think that's a huge part of the center of what I do right
Yeah,
now.
yeah,
Is clinging to form, to redefine it, to
yeah.
remix it. Sorry to plug the title of this, but it's truly
Yeah.
like the synthesis of my work is many. It encapsulates many artistic forms.
Yeah, like mixed is such a theme to you. It's a theme to you. Racially, it's a theme to you. In the multidisciplinary sense, it's a theme to you in your collaborations and partnerships.
Mhm.
You are mixed up in all the good ways.
I see Sherida here. I've got to say, hi, Sherida.
um, I wonder if you could, if you have a story of coming out that you would like to share, or what coming out means to you when you hear the term.
Yeah. Do you know what's so funny is I still have this question um, to this day of like why coming out is synonymous with queer folk. Like, I don't know, no straight people that have to come out. Like, it's not like you go, Mom, Dad, I, I am attracted to the opposite sex. So for some odd reason, like I'm still always questioning why that is an experience that
Mm.
predominantly queer people have to go through. But I guess it's interesting for me. Mine's a bit of a three-parter. Because I always knew I was gay. It was never really a question. Um, and I think we all do, in a sense, know that we are, but it sort of springs on you when you have to deal with the realities of it. And
Yeah.
so I was at theatre school in Toronto, and I had a teacher that said, oh, to be an actor, you truly need to know who you are as a person. And I was like, ah,
Uh-oh.
I got to address this. And so that night, of all nights, I told my sister and my mom, and it was so scary and vulnerable. And and my mom said, um, I always knew. I wasn't really surprised to her, but don't tell your dad. And
Mm.
I was like, but what? So I sort of had a half coming out, and then a year and a half later, I was in Australia, and I was a bit tipsy, and I phoned my dad, and I sort of just ripped the band-aid off halfway around the world and was like, okay, you can deal with this info. I don't want to, I just need to tell you. And it's funny with my dad. I think he's still worried that being queer will limit opportunities for me, and I just don't agree with that at all. I think it's an awakening and a deepening of self and opportunities. And, if people did have a problem with it, I wouldn't want to work with them anyways.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it was so clear in my head.
yeah.
Um, But then I would say like my deepest awakening of my queerness and my fullest authenticity was when I moved away and I came out to Shaw and I met you and I mean this like I met my match in you
Oh,
artistically and mentally and physically. Like it just made so much sense.
right.
And 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 it sounds cliche, but you're my soulmate. It just made
Oh,
sense, and I adore you so much. And
oh, that's
yeah, and so that was like the biggest awakening for me. And it's interesting being 30 this year. I can say that like it took a while. It took 3 decades, but I like I could enter my
yeah.
full self. But the revolving door, who knows? Like you can,
Yeah, like it's interesting, like the distance of being in Australia made the intimacy of coming out to your dad maybe more possible, that you
yeah,
felt far away, that you were safe to do that, and your mom saying she knew and apprehensive. Like that's very much, I think, this revolving door coming
yeah.
out.
Like who was she protecting? Was she
Yeah.
protecting me or like
And,
it's
and don't you feel like it's a vulnerable question? Like you kind of go, oh, and it shouldn't be. Like rationally, I go, that's a big deal, but it is something about bringing our full selves.
right?
Which is, did you feel that like as an actor? Did you feel like, you know, there was pressure to conform to sort of heteronormative norms? Like I know, like when you audition for film,
Mm.
feel like there are clear hits or types that are have a heteronormative bias or
Oh God, yeah. There are so many, and
yeah,
it's like there's another added layer for someone like myself who is mixed. I do pass to some. For some people, like it's no question they see my blackness,
yeah,
and then there's this added layer of you know um, you were talking about it earlier today of like what is it to play straight, what is it to
right,
play queer, and
yeah,
again this idea of rejecting those ideas. I That's what
yeah,
I just I have to do that as part of the work.
yeah, yeah,
Otherwise, you get too much in your head about it, especially with film and TV. And
yeah,
I have to trust that it's not just my queerness that's an aspect that they're looking at.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
my hair that day.
yeah,
It's my the shape of my mouth. My mouth is too big. Like it's
mhm,
so that's why I love theater.
yeah, yeah. Because you can sort of maybe transcend those perceived limitations of types
Yeah,
and
yeah,
bring your full self to it, eh?
right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Sure. Do you remember the first queer character in a film or a play that you saw that made an impact on you?
Oh, yeah, my God. I have two, and I'll try and be succinct with these. Because the first is a little scary. It speaks to the depictions of queerness in film and
Yeah.
how as a culture we really cling to those definitions. And it was the film Psycho. And
Oh,
I my mom, oh my God, I still will never be so angry with her that she made me watch that when I was the same age that she was when she watched it. And so I was about 8 when I saw Psycho. Could not shower or do I did, I was afraid of so many things. And but I knew that Anthony Perkins was, gay and died of AIDS. He
um,
was the first person I was
um,
told.
wow.
And obviously an incredible film, but the depictions of his queerness connected to incest, like, it was. it was it leaves you feeling,
Mm.
like a bit of a bad taste in your mouth. And
Mm.
talk about Hitchcock, like such an incredible but problematic figure that he was. And
Yeah.
like I said, I think that's the dangers of film is we learn our biases from them.
Yeah.
But I guess an example of a positive reinforcement of queerness is when I was in high school, actually, my drama teacher said, "Oh my God, you should play this part of Melina in Kiss of the Spider Woman." And it
Oh.
was it was Brent, the late Brent Carver,
Yeah.
beautiful Brent Carver, that played that part, obviously. And I just
Yeah.
remember going, "Whoa!" Like seeing that performance and him getting Tony Awards, the possibilities of what can be achieved
Yeah.
being queer. Like he set a standard for Canadian theater. So I would say those two very polar opposites,
Oh,
but
yeah.
they have stayed with me for sure.
Amazing. Amazing. Here's a tough one, and we've sort of covered it a little bit or touched on it, is what does the closet mean to you personally, historically, in your work, and beyond it? Does Mae West's comment about the revolving door resonate with you?
Huh. Well, when I just take like the idea of a closet,
Yeah.
it's structured. It's sometimes orderly, sometimes it's a mess.
Totally.
There's mothballs in there. It's restrictive. It's closed off, and so I feel like once you come out, you don't want to go back in unless you're like Tom Cruise in South Park. Mom, please come out of the closet, please. Um, yeah, and I guess it's funny. Like I've likened, I've likened being mixed as coming out of the closet because so many people will go, "What are you? And where are you from?" And so
Yeah.
I'm literally coming out all the time in that regard. And for me, my queerness and my blackness and my mixedness are all synonymous things.
Yeah.
Um, but I guess thinking about the revolving door, the first image that comes to mind is Buddy in the film Elf,
Oh, yeah.
where
Yeah.
he's like running in the revolving door, and um, I love revolving doors. I get lost. You can get lost running in circles, and I think
Yeah.
Mae West is so apt in her definition of that, and like talk about an amazing like Mae West. When you were working on Sex at the Shaw, I was obviously privy to some of that process, and like talk about allyship. Eh?
Yeah.
She was a true ally to us.
Speaking of allies, I just have to get one of our little doggies they've been so good today. And then the two of us get on. And of
Oh my God.
course, you know who? Come here.
They
You.
all.
There you go. They've been pretty good. But he's like, this is
Doug, if you
Jughead,
just
everybody. Jughead.
make this like it's
Oh, it wouldn't be a chat without old Jughead getting involved. It's
uh,
interesting because in your film Mixed Up, I'd love you to talk about that, like what it was like to make, because it's as much about being queer as it is about being mixed race, and you draw a lot of really interesting connections between that intersection. What was it? What inspired that film? And
oh my gosh. So
tell folks about it.
so
People who haven't seen it, like, tell them about the film.
yeah, it's obviously, a process that was very cumulative, and it sort of drew on experiences from my child life and
Yeah,
my adult life. And I think the biggest part for me was um, this idea of how we learn to find inner cohesion when parts of our body are in opposition with each other.
Yeah.
And there was a beautiful term that I stumbled upon in the creation of it, this idea of contiguous, things that are opposite that share a common border, and how we as people need to learn. It's not about quelling that or, mastering it, but it's living with inside of it. And
Mm.
I think, so many people think of queerness and blackness as opposing things, and they're not.
Mm.
They are, the center of pride. It began with black queer folk, and I guess I just wanted to legitimize a queer narrative and something that didn't speak to white people, because so many were always trying to explain things for white audiences. And so it
Yeah.
was a film about being mixed for mixed people. And I think being that specific allowed for um, universality. And I've had, a lot of people
Interesting. Yeah.
reach out and tell me how much it resonated with them. And that means the world to me because,
Yeah.
when you're in your creative zone, you're not always thinking about the end. You're always in the present of it.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
But you know, I guess a little bit about the process working with Jack Fox,
Mm.
love you, Jack, and I met Jack through the Shaw. David Cooper and Emily Cooper. Jack is
Yeah.
married to Emily, and so we worked on the film all remotely, and it premiered on Remembrance Day of last year and has been in festivals now. It's available in the UK and New Zealand. And
Yeah.
I'm just so glad to be able to share my story and hope that it
Mhm.
resonates with
Mhm.
one little mixed kid.
I love what you say about the specific and the universal. And universality is such a problematic idea because it suggests our experiences are all the same or shared in some way. And yet it's the very thing that, I hear all the time about queer experience. Like people will say, oh, it's not a queer love story. It's really a love story, as though the queerness is, excluding the ability for all people of all orientations to be touched by. And that, that you tell that story, your story so specifically
Mm,
connects to people in all kinds of different ways.
yeah. And I guess it was important for me of using mixed media to tell it. So to use art and photography and animation and acting and spoken word. Like it,
Yeah.
for me, queerness and blackness are like that. They are undefinable. And
Yeah.
so um, I will say it's interesting when you're creating something that is undefinable and then people say, tell me about it. You sort of go,
Well, it's undefinable.
watch the film.
Right. 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 I'm curious, like, because we met at the Shaw Festival, and it's a repertoire that is wide ranging in perspectives, from queer writers from another time to queer contemporary. Like you met Michelle Marc Bouchard when you were at the Shaw, to straight writers writing about gay characters in a kind of questionable way, to really disruptive and subversive works. I'm curious about like what you think about that repertoire and how queer is represented, like how we present classical repertoire. And I know you love the classical theater, like you were saying just this morning that your prime interests are film, new work, and classical theater. And so what do you think how should queer present in classical repertoire? And how might the Shaw be thinking about this today?
Oh my gosh,
The
that's
big one.
such a loaded question.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I guess it's we're talking about a time period in Shaw that was so coded
Yeah.
that it's hard to sort of, it's possible, but it's hard to take it out of those codified languages.
Yeah.
But I will say that like it's possible, and seeing the contemporaries of Shaw from Coward and Oscar Wilde, like I've yet to see, but I'm very excited to see Noel Coward done with a queer couple at the center,
Hmm.
and how it resonates for an audience. It could be very I don't know what Shaw's audience would feel about that, but I'd be excited to see how it lands on ears.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, yeah, I hope that answered some of the questions. It's a long
Yeah.
question.
Well, there's just a lot of context in a
Yeah,
classical
yeah.
repertoire. And I just think what your love about the classical theater is, what draws you to it.
Yeah.
What are
Well,
some
I
of the
think
parts maybe you'd like to play or plays you'd like to direct?
oh, well, it's wild. I was thinking about this earlier. This um, like what is one of the oldest pieces of literature that we have?
Mm,
And I was thinking of Homer's The Odyssey,
mm,
and then I was going on to like who are some queer icons,
mm.
and I've never even seen Achilles and Patroclus
Yeah.
depicted like Homer, and there was suggestions that they were lovers, and so to see that afresh and new, I
Mm,
I love leaning into those classical texts to see how they land on
yeah.
modern ears and perspectives.
Yeah.
So that's definitely one that was I've been thinking about quite a bit
Mm,
lately.
indeed. What are you currently working on? Like what are the projects that you've got on the go right now? And how does being queer inform the process on brand new things? So like I think about Portia, I think about Diaries, I think about Wide Sargasso Sea. Three projects I know you've got in your in your cooker at different stages of
Yeah, yeah, you spoke about it in my bio, the piece I'm doing about Portia White,
yeah.
and and I guess what I'm just so excited about that project to have a Black Canadian story that someone who was recognized as a significant figure in Canadian history that people don't know about. like,
So tell
like
us about it. Like who is Portia White? Tell our listeners a bit about
yeah,
that.
yeah. So Portia White was a Black Canadian contralto who battled discrimination while making international acclaim in the mid 20th century. And she did this coming from a family not unlike Walter Borden, you know,
Mm,
like so many siblings in
yeah,
rural Nova Scotia, and she
yeah,
made a name for herself.
yeah,
But as I was saying before, the irony is when there's no when there's no sort of path for people or foundations for people that are
yeah,
laid out, you've got to carve it for yourself. And she did that.
yeah.
But I guess a part of that is the inevitability that you are pushed into the peripheries of history. And
Mm,
so that project is, you know, it's the, I believe it's the first time that it's being told by Black creatives at the
yeah.
center. And it explores all of these ideas of to be the first Black, you know, and the pressures of that and the isolations of that, and using the the medium of opera to explore it using classical repertoire and Negro spirituals and R&B and hip hop and blues
Right.
to bring her to life, and you know my queerness and mixedness completely inform that because I bring all of my perspective to it.
It's
And
interesting. We're talking to Alistair a bit about that earlier today about where like the story itself per se, like it's not outing Portia White as a lesbian woman in her time, but there's definitely a queer aesthetic at work in the exploration of her life, how she performs herself. Like one of the
right,
things, if I may share, is you depict her, she's depicted in three parts. So she's not presented as just by one actor, but by three. Would you like, and it makes me think of the revolving door. Like, you know,
yeah,
could
yeah,
you talk about how you did that or how you arrived at that or how you see her in three parts?
yeah. Well, it's interesting, like for someone that had a lot of male attention in her life, she never ended up with anyone.
Hmm.
She didn't get married. And so the whole what if of her gender and fluidity and her understanding
Yeah,
of it in that time period that she lived from
right.
1911 to 68, like who knows what she thought. And I think some of the most intimate relationships she had were with women
Hmm.
on a friend to friend basis. But I'm not, again, as you're saying, I'm not trying to say she was queer, but by having three women play her, there's a possibility that, you know, women are going to be playing men
Yeah.
in her life, and you can't not see a queerness when there are two women on stage together to
And
be
why did you decide
lovers.
to have Portia played by three? Like, why didn't you have like one create this one solo part for one singer who plays Portia from
Right.
1912 to 1968? Why did you split her into three?
Well, many reasons, but I think one of the biggest um, one of the biggest reasons for me was this idea of the I don't want to say the performative aspect of who we are, but there's the legend of Portia
Yeah.
and you know how she saw herself and
Mm.
how she was intimately with people. Like there's so many layers to this idea of her being the triptych. Like
Yeah.
we all have, I feel like we all have these versions of inside of ourselves, like how I
Yeah.
want to be presented on social media, how I am with you in person.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm very different in either.
So people can understand. Portia in the opera is Portia body, Portia spirit, and Portia soul. And that to me immediately makes me think about the revolving door. It makes me
Right.
think about sides of where our bodies are really prominent or legislated or reacting, where our voices, our spirits are,
Right.
and where our soul resides. I think that's
Well,
really,
right. It's
I
also
relate to
this,
that as well.
yeah, yeah, this idea of her being, you know, she was a concert singer. She wasn't an opera singer, so she could be a voice, but not a body. So in some ways, I wanted to explore how she might be fractured
Yeah,
into versions of herself, and it is, you know,
yeah,
about her confronting death, and through death,
yeah,
on the journey through death, she must wrestle with these parts of herself.
yeah.
And I don't want to give too much of it away, but there's
No.
a there's a reconciling with herself and
Mm.
people in her family that she's able to,
Yeah,
you know,
which I just
live.
liken to. I invite to like it reminds me of how we have a sense of who we are as queer people, and then a sense of how we perform ourselves in the world. You know, so it feels very. I don't know when you made that choice with that piece, it felt very resonant with your queerness.
Mm.
No?
Oh, totally.
Oh,
No, I'm agreeing with it.
oh. You were like, what? What
What you talk about?
Yeah. Um, you're a writer, a director, an actor, and a designer. how are each discipline different? And is there one that lends itself more fully to your coming out or your queerness than another?
Hmm. Oh my gosh. See, they all inform it in different ways, I think. I
Hmm.
think, being queer, I don't want to generalize, but it's given me especially as a designer, I think a very keen eye to um, aesthetic and
Yeah.
visually appealing images, you could say. And
Hmm.
so that's definitely something that informs my design and directing work.
Hmm.
And I think as an actor, it's just having an awareness of, you know, all that lives inside of me. Like the blinders
Hmm.
aren't like this. I think I'm acutely aware of my surroundings and my maleness and my femaleness, and um, yeah, it's it's loaded.
Hmm. See, I would say that like the performer is your body.
Right.
The director is maybe your spirit, and your designer or your image maker, your filmmaker is your soul. I might say that. How would you identify that?
um, no, I do think you hit it on the head, actually.
Yeah. Okay. So you have those like it's all this theme with you about mixed, about that contiguous relationship of things that sit side by side but are more frequently identified as being completely distinct. Isn't that really interesting with you?
Yeah, and I don't think it's gonna go away. like,
It's not.
I just, in embracing all sides of me, like you've gotta,
Mm,
you've got to take it all on the artistic journey and the personal journey.
right.
Because then otherwise it's like to deny one's existence. It will catch up on you in the end.
Yeah.
Like it happened years ago when people were passing for white, you know, in passing for something that you're not, or denying one's own existence. It eats away at you.
Mm,
And I think for me, that that that's just gonna be the inevitable part of my personal journey and my artistic journey. Is I need to.
yeah.
It all informs
Yeah.
everything.
There's a kind of passing that exists too, and when we're identified as straight people or presumptions that they make, where we've
Right,
often had to correct bell repairman and things like that about what our relationship is because they make the heteronormative assumption, yeah.
right, right.
And you're always fierce about that identity. You're always fierce about coming out, being out, and
Yeah, yeah.
identifying.
Well, I think part of it is like I love this idea of using queer as a verb, using queerness as a way to
Yeah.
challenge heteronormativity by analyzing places and cultures and ideas and as an artist sometimes texts even that
Yeah.
and using queering as a method that can be applied to all walks of life and even the term itself queer can be queered, you know because much of queer theory I think it involves working to fight against normalization even in the field itself.
Yeah, yeah.
And so queering for me, I don't. I feel like it's something we do. It's rather than something we are.
Oh, I see.
If that makes sense.
It does, but we are those things we do.
Of
Like that
course.
is the
Yeah,
thing,
yeah.
you know? So it's a bit of both. This year, you've been involved in Wild Seed with Black Lives Matter Toronto, and it's kind of been a very intense process. And I wonder how you could speak to what that process has been like and how that's changed you or affected you or what you're learning in it and how that focus and that kind of environment has affected your articulation of your art as a queer man too.
Yeah, I will say, um, um, I'm so glad to have had that cohort. That's
Can you tell people what it is, like what you
Yeah,
do?
yeah, yeah. So Wild Seed Black Arts Fellowship, it's a 22-month residency that I'm part of with Black Lives Matter Toronto, and it's being run by Cyrus Mayer and Rodney Diverlis and Raven, who were founders of Black Lives Matter Toronto. And it's really a program about bridging arts and advocacy. And so all of the cohorts, there's 14 of us, and we all
Yeah,
come from various forms of artistic, you know, practices.
yeah,
And especially with what happened with George Floyd and
mm,
around the world, like to have people to talk to, even though it's been really, you know, difficult in isolation of COVID, to have, you know, a family so immediately to talk about art with and to
mm,
throw ideas around with. And I think we're moving towards collaborating all together on a
wow,
curated show. Um, and there, you know, Me Time, DJ Me Time, and oh my God, Courage Akai, who's a deaf artist. Like they're such incredible people,
mm,
and and I think a big discussion we've been having that has really been impacting my work is because one of our cohorts is a deaf artist. Like there's such a lack of representation of Black deaf artists and how we can open up our process to involve everyone. Like it's really making me think about how accessibility plays into
yeah, yeah,
the work that we're creating on throughout mediums. And
yeah,
so, in a nutshell, that's like I can't even I don't even think I can give it justice the way
yeah,
I've described it. It's incredible, and being someone who, as I was saying, I'm sometimes perceived as white. Um, they accept me unconditionally
mhm,
as Black, and I just go, thank you for seeing that, because
wow,
I'll tell you, if I hear, oh, you just don't look Black again,
no,
like, it's I'll be smacking that person who says
no,
that.
mm, right, and that in turn emboldens your queerness too, right? Your
Yeah, yeah, totally.
I've seen that. I've really seen that confidence in you and courage in you through that too. Amazing. Do you have a favorite queer role or play?
Oh my God. Yes,
Okay.
I do. Um, and it's someone who I've had the opportunity to play.
Yeah.
Um, Tiresias.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Like, oh my God, I had the opportunity to do a piece by Moira Buffini
Hmm. Uh,
called Welcome to Thebes, and it was a modern interpretation of Antigone. And and so in this piece, I got to play Tiresias, and I got to costume it. And I worked with a director named Rafał Sokolowski.
mm,
It was when I was in theater school, and just to be able to live inside of, you know, someone that was male, was female, was intersex. Like
Yeah.
the power of that. Um, it just it gave me such a release, and I know that that was noted by Rafal. He was like, "Yeah, this is you got to lean into this because you are such a chameleon
Yeah.
in so many ways." So that was fun. I love that.
And is there a dream project that you have that you would love to take on, that you'd love to do?
Oh my gosh. See, I'm a believer in something that Sherida Eswar said to me
Yeah.
that we don't choose the projects, they choose us. And so like I'm not right now, I guess I'm so focused on what I'm creating. I yeah, I've got projects that I want to do, but right now I'm so focused that I know that something will present itself later that I'm meant to do.
Uh,
And
yeah, and I know that about you too. Like that you have these visions of and these ideas that come forward, and then you keep building on them and building on them. Are you able to talk about Diaries of a Dowry or
uh,
you're
that
really on now? And
that's a funny one because we're in the process of doing NDAs,
yeah,
which is a
oh,
non-disclosure agreement. So it's yeah, I will say I'm very grateful to Crow's Theater who are helping in some of the development on that project. We're involved in a writers retreat, but that piece really centers on the institution of dowry across many cultures and through a queer and a feminine gaze. And and I sort of knew um, I knew Sherida was perfect to collaborate with on that. And then
yeah.
Alison Wong came on board too. And I think creating a piece while being really cognizant of its cultural dramaturgy as it's in development is so critical
Hmm.
in a piece that is plurilingual and using multiple languages. And it's I think it's going to be cultural dramaturgy is something I haven't seen done much in film,
Hmm.
and I'm excited to sort of, I don't want to say set a standard, but to allow that to be alive in its creation.
And I think too,
So
it's interesting exploring something that's about the institution and the commodification of marriage,
yes,
which we think about or tend to presentations of that are in a very hetero kind of lens. So
yeah,
I'm curious that you're interested in that.
yeah. I know rejecting form and seeking it. It's always in there. It's that push pull effect.
Yeah, yeah. And I know too that you're really a theme, I would say, in a lot of your work is history. Like you from Samoa to Wide Sargasso Sea, which is a project that's in its very beginning stages with you, that personal histories, lost histories, black histories, queer histories are important to you and important to the works you create. Do you want to talk a bit about that? About why you're
Yeah,
into those stories? And
yeah. I think the feminine gaze is just innate. Being queer, like we see from many perspectives, and that one is truly, central. In at least it is in my experience, and I think exploring the feminine power, I think it's available to us as men. Um, the importance, obviously, is not taking stories away from women, but obviously surrounding yourself with collaborators um, that are key to each process. I think history just completely informs us now. I'm fascinated by how we learn and unlearn and repeat history.
Mm,
Like we're in that process right now in this country. We're
right.
unlearning social biases and
Mm,
um, like things that we were taught to be real but aren't in fact. I guess I've been excited in what it means to break the chain of history, like
mm,
breaking that cycle. And it's certainly at the center of Mix Up and C'est Moi, which was a film of mine that chronicled the history of Marie Joseph Angelique, who was a black slave in 1734 in Montreal. And, you know, in her defiance, she broke the silence of history. And and this project, White Sargasso, which you said it is very early in development, and it centers on my great grandmother,
mm,
who, you know, um, sort of broke these waves of silence, and I guess it's about breaking these waves of silence that are in my family and in so many stories of the diaspora. And a lot of our, at least my family's history, but I know a lot of people in the Caribbean, we don't know our past.
mm,
It's not documented.
mm, mm,
And so I'm interested in how history informs us now and how my grandmother's history in Cuba and Jamaica informed me now. Because yes, I'm in North America, but North and South America, like for me, they're the same continent.
and that journey of your grandmother's that begins in Jamaica, is that right?
Well, I've come to understand that she was born in Costa Rica.
Costa Rica, yes, sorry.
Yeah, and so like West Africa to Costa
Costa
Rica, Jamaica, Cuba, like it's
Cuba,
so
then to the UK,
yeah,
and
yeah,
you were born in the UK, come to Canada, and so there's like how that journeying, that travel, that
yeah,
fleet
yeah.
and arriving is sort of thematic generationally within you.
Right. And this idea of like a nomadic life that moves to agrarian culture, like there are some scholars that believe that when we became an agrarian culture, it was
Mm.
the it was like the death of society. Like we were always moving. And so to be talk about the revolving door, like
Yeah, yeah.
we our histories were always in motion. And so for this a big question for me on my Wired Sargasso is what does it mean to be rooted and find your center and your roots and be content with that
Mm, mm,
when there's so many moving parts going on around us that you know yeah there's so many shifting sands that I think it's not such a bad thing to settle down.
mm. And Sargasso Sea, like, means a sea within a sea, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And let's see, there are so many connections to me and you with this subject today because, My White Sargasso Sea too is a novel by Jean Rhys, which is a prequel to Jane Eyre about Bertha Rochester and her life in the Caribbean prior to. So it opens up like what we think this, colonized Western Gothic romance of the 19th century, what roots are inside it, what journeys and
Totally.
seas within seas are in it.
Yeah, yeah. And I will say, like, working, oh, I see someone in the chat who was in this class with me with Aaron Shields. I did a writing
Oh, yeah.
course with Aaron with Anahita. Hi, Anahita. And and Oh my God, Erin Shields is working on Jane Eyre right now. And
Yeah.
so, she's another one that, we're so drawn to these histories to see how they,
And to reframe them, right? To
yeah, yeah,
reconsider these stories, right? In different ways. But that's what I find interesting because like all these projects you're working on, and on one level, a less sensitive ear could say, yeah, but these aren't queer stories at all.
right,
And yet, to me, they're essentially queer.
right.
What do you think about
Yeah,
that? How do you
I,
respond?
I completely agree with you. It's, like, I think it's a heteronormative idea to say that we are a queer perspective is a niche when it's not. Like it's my normal, and like
Right,
I'm not going to see any of these narratives through a queer lens. Therefore, it's
right.
going to. And there's I don't want to give too much away, but in the diaries project that I'm working on, um, there is a very fluid queer character at the center who is I'm so excited to explore that narrative.
Hmm. Okay, I've got to ask the question because I know you have strong feelings about it and shifting feelings. You have a revolving door on it. What's your take on straight playing gay?
So nuanced. Um, until there's equal opportunity for people. Oh my God, it's so loaded.
I know.
Um, I just think that until there's sort of equal opportunity in telling people's stories,
Yeah.
like queer people we should be telling our stories. But then this is Howie, the actor, speaking. I don't want to be limited to just sharing my own perspective,
Yeah.
even though it's not a limited experience.
Yeah.
But it's and then some of the greatest actors have played straight actors have played queer and vice versa. So I think it's an ongoing debate and question.
Yeah.
And yeah, oh, that's a hard question.
I know you don't want to answer it because like I know you have strong feelings about it, and maybe it's about like I don't know, like how our queerness can be part of a fullness that we bring to roles, whether the characters
Yeah,
can be gay, yeah.
but I don't like. I also don't want straight people commodifying our experience. I guess that's the
Right.
center of it. Is like I'm done with the coming out story where coming out is the center of that's like for I guess some people just generalize and think that's the only thing that is interesting in us is that we have to come out.
Right.
Like there's so much more to our experience that
Yeah.
I you want me to take a side? I will say I do think queer people should be playing queer people.
Yeah. I don't want you to take a side. I just
Uh,
want you to say what you think, you know?
yeah, yeah,
Because like coming out is a constant to me, always.
yeah, yeah,
They're like they're
totally.
always coming out. Like I have no problem with coming out stories. It's just a coming out story. Or what we've encountered was like, our loved ones saying, but we don't care that you're gay. We're going, but we want you to care that we're gay.
Yeah,
Like that's
yeah,
the whole point. So it's I guess how it gets focused in the narrative.
right.
Yeah?
Mhm. You must be so tired, babe.
No, not at all.
No?
No. This is an interview with you, baby, not with me. Okay, last question. Do you have counsel for a queer young person who might be listening to this Instagram right now, watching it? Or maybe to your 15-year-old self to encourage imagination and expression
Hmm.
What would you say to a young person right now who's mixed, who's queer?
Hmm.
What advice would you like to give them that maybe you didn't get when you were 15?
I would say that queerness is not just your label, it's
Mm,
how you see the world.
mhm.
It allows such a broad, wide perspective. Um, I do think for like any queer youth, um, you don't have to come out, not immediately, and I sort of on what I was saying before, like straight people don't have to come out, so why do you? Just like do you, boo? And but honestly, like to find people you feel safe with and that
Yeah.
can share your struggles with is a huge thing too. And did you ask the RuPaul question?
What's the RuPaul question?
What would you say to your younger self?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. What would you say to your younger self?
Calm down.
Calm down.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like take it easy. Like
Yeah.
things will happen when you're ready to receive them,
Right. Right.
which is so hard. It's so hard to do in
Yeah.
practice, but like it'll
So,
happen.
like you say, like the play chooses you, right? You've got to listen to the world
Yeah, yeah.
as you respond to it. Well, I'm really happy that you came out. I don't think don't care. I think like, yes, you must. You must come out. I'm thrilled you did.
I know. We got married.
I know, and it means I'm so happy you did, and I'm so happy you came out today to have this conversation. So thank you so much, Howie.
Well done.
It's
We got
beautiful.
through the day.
Oh, indeed. And I just want to thank all of our guests that we've had talking today, Ryan Cunningham and Alistair Newton, Walter Borden, and Laura Condlin. You've all really given a lot of yourselves and shared a lot with us, so I really appreciate it. And I thank everybody at the Shaw Festival, and a big shout out to Michelle Mohammed, who has been backstage uh, masterminding all of this for us so we can have these conversations today. And especially today, I'm very, very grateful for these conversations on what has been a very tough and very tender day for so many of us here in Canada. So I thank you all. Love you all. Love you, Howard. Thank you so
Love you,
much.
baby.
Okay. And
Hey,
everybody have a great Pride and thank you for tuning in.
happy Friday.
Happy Pride.